Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to the demo on uh, using XSLT with XML documents that have the style of data interchange. And we're going to be working on one of our demo projects, the one that has the data for the ASIS student chapter. And let me open up that directory right here. And you can see I've got a folder that's going to carry all the documents, which right now just has the XML document and the DTD. We could have used the schema version, but we're just using the DTD. And then I've got an Oxygen project, which I can give some kind of arbitrary name, in this case, this project. And if I double click on that, we should open up the Oxygen editor with this project that we want to work with. All right, let's make sure we have the data we want. Let's open the XML document, and let's open the DTD. And let's go back to the XML document, which we can see from the doctype is connected to the DTD, and validate it. And we see it's a valid document. And this has about 6 or 7, maybe 5, something like that, schools on it. It's a partial list, but just enough for us to be able to practice with. Okay? All right, so what do we want to do? Well, with the XML document that we have right now, it's pretty hard for us to put it into a friendly form. What we'd like to do is to create an XSLT style sheet that we can use to transform the XML document that we're looking at here into an HTML page that we can open in the browser and see a friendly document that has the styling that we want. It has headings and all that kind of stuff. Gives us the opportunity to maybe put a couple of the elements in a slightly different order than they occur in the input document. And generally speaking, create a friendly HTML page. So how do we get that started? Well, we need a new XSLT. So let's go up to the menu for the Oxygen editor and click on File, New. And I've recently used this, okay? If you don't have XSLT style sheeting you recently used, then you could go down to New Document and open it up. And XSLT, these are not in alphabetical order. So XSLT is actually up towards the top because it's frequently used, I guess. So we say create, and it's going to create a style sheet for us. Now, I'm going to change a thing or two about the style sheet, okay? Right now, we said that we're using version 2.0 of XSLT. And when I wrote the course content that we're using, version 2.0 was just a gleam in the eye of the mothers and fathers of XSLT, so we were using 1.0. And right now, as of yet, we haven't introduced any 2.0 features. So I just want to go back and say 1.0. All right? So I've got that. So I have an empty style sheet. Sorry, didn't want that. Didn't want that slash in it. So let's see what happens. We want to save this. Sorry. So we want to save File, Save As. And it's going to pop up, and it looks like it's going into the document subdirectory, which is good. And let's call this assist. Sorry, a lot of times I like to give these a program-oriented name. So generate assist chapter list. Okay, because that's pretty much what we're going to do. We don't have to put the -XSL or XSLT because it's going to be automatically added on for us. This tool prefers to add on .xsl, and that seems to be the industry standard. So that's what we're going to get, .xsl. All right, and now we need to associate the XML document that we have with that XSLT document, and we need to do that in a transformation scenario. So we click on the wrench that's immediately to the right of the red play button, and it says we don't have any transformation scenarios yet, so let's create a new one. Okay, XML transformation with XSLT. And because we're pointing at the XML document, which is, I think, the right workflow to do this with, it picks up the name from that. But I would rather pick up the name from the XSLT document. So I'm going to say generate assist chapter list. Okay? And we're going to say that we're going to use the current file URL, okay, which is the XML document that we're currently pointed to. And we want to match it up with an XSLT transformation, and it's going to be the one called generate assist chapter list.xsl. So we're just going to select that, say open. And one of the things we're going to see a lot of, we're going to say that there are a lot of different things that are in front of just the name of the file. We're just going to use the name of the file because we know that it's in the current directory, and that's fine. Okay, we don't have to do anything with the transformer because we chose version 1.0. That's going to work just fine. And now we need to go to the third tab of the view that we're looking at. We're currently on this XSLT tab. Now we want to go to the Output tab. And we say we want to save it as. And something I'd like to do is I'd like to use the current file name .html. Well, how do we get the current file name? Well, if we go to just after the dropdown, there's a down arrow with a ... Insert editor variables. I'm just going to click on that. And the fourth choice down is $CFN, the current file name without the extension. So click on that, and it puts that in there. And right after it, just put .html. Okay, so it's going to create a new file, or it's going to write over the file if we already have it, and it's going to call it the name of the XML document that we are transforming, and that instead of giving it the extension of XML, it gives it the extension of HTML. And I also want to click Open in Browser/System Application because we would like to look at the results. So let's just say OK, and then click on Apply Associated. Okay. And you'll probably recognize this from a couple of these things that I've shown you in the past. At least I have on the online conversation group. You'll see that we just get all of the content from inside all of the elements in the document. Okay? And we don't get any of the content that is inside attributes, okay? And because we didn't create a friendly shell for the HTML page, even though the browser's been good enough to display it for us, if we turn around and look at this, let's just close this, we can actually open now this HTML page. And look, it did take the name of the XML document, but it has extension .html. And let's open that. And we'll see that, without asking for it, we got an XML declaration. But we didn't get any of the parts of the HTML page. Okay, well, let's go on to the next step. All right, and the next step is going to be for us to create a proper HTML page with which, within which we're going to build our document. So let's go to the XSL, and we're going to use a statement. Sorry, I don't know how I got to this bad place. So let's do a tab. We're going to use XSL, which is the prefix associated with all the statements that are part of XSLT. And we're going to use output. Okay, this is the instruction on which we tell the processor what we want it to do with the output. And what I'd like to do here, because in the lecture I created an XSLT 1.1 transitional document, and because a lot of people are interested in HTML5, I'd like to show you how to get an HTML5 document using the tools that we're using. So the first of the attributes we code is method equal, and we're going to say HTML. Okay, and then let's just string these out. I'm sorry. It doesn't want to behave the way I'd like it to behave. And then there is an option in the Saxon version of the XSLT processor where you can say, I want version 5.0 of HTML, and it'll give you a lot of the features that you want without having to force them. We want to encode the document using UTF-8 encoding, UTF_8. Okay, we would like the output of this to be indented, yes. So let's add that. And the very last thing is, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how I got that, but that wasn't what I wanted. Get rid of all this extra stuff. And the very last thing that we want to do is that we don't want an XML declaration at the beginning of our output file because HTML5 the documents typically don't have them. Okay, so there is an attribute here called omit XML declaration, and we're going to take the yes option. Okay, and then we're going to end this element. And I have no idea why it's complaining, but we'll see. Attribute encoding is not allowed on this element. Well, I don't like that. So let me just pause for a second while I solve that. Okay. Well, can't even get the pause thing to come up. Isn't that nice? We're not going to worry about that just yet, because we will get that fixed. My. Things work against you when you don't want them to work against you. So why don't we just save this and close it and open it again. And we are still having a problem with this thing that we're looking for. Oddly enough, I have copied this from something on which it works perfectly well. So, let's see if we can copy this. Just put it right over top of it. Paste. Okay. Now I don't know what I typed wrong, but as you can see, my error went away. So this is a little bit of a lesson in how to not get yourself into trouble. Okay, so those are the things that we want to do here, and now we want to have a template rule that's going to match on the root, the slash. So let's put that in. So XSL template, and we're going to say match equal, sorry about that, say match equal slash. Okay, that's going to match the very root of the input XML document. And let's just put in some interesting stuff. So right now, in HTML5, the document just begins with HTML, and we match it up with an end HTML. And then we have a head, and we match it up with an end head. And then we've got a title, and that matches up with an end title. And I am just going to say ASIS, A-S-I-S, and I'm going to put the ampersand in. Remember, we have to escape those. Amper, A-M-P, lowercase, semicolon, T, student, chapters, and in parentheses, I'm going to say partial list. Uh-oh. Let's get that fixed. Partial list. Okay? And then, after the head, we have the body. So we've got the body, and we match it up with the end. And let's say we still want to put out all the, we want to restart the default navigation and go and visit all of the elements nodes and burp out their content, as I like to say. Well, how do we start that up again? I haven't really showed you yet. XSL apply templates. That's what starts that kind of navigation that is built in by default. So what happens is that when we match a template, we stop. And if we say XSL apply templates again, then we start up wherever we are and we continue to navigate through the document. So this should put all of the content into the body. Okay, so what we should get is a page that looks suspiciously like the one that we just had, but it has a very polite HTML5 shell surrounding it. Okay, let's do that. So one of the hard things to remember when you're doing this is to go back to the XML document and click on that before you run the transformation again. Now, you can run the transformation by clicking on the wrench and making sure that the transformation you want is checked and saying apply associated. Or once you've done it one time and this is all loaded up, the alternative is you can just click on the red play button. And again, here we are. We get all the content that we had, so that looks good. Okay, now, do we have a title? Well, in Safari, if you don't have two tabs, you don't see the title. So let's open up another tab, and there's our title tab, Assist Student Chapters Partial List. So we did get it, although in the Safari, you don't see it unless you have a second tab. Okay, that's good. And then let's look at this HTML file, which has now been updated, and let's see what we have. Well, we have an HTML. Okay, we have the meta tag has been automatically added for us, and that's not well-formed HTML in that it doesn't have an end tag, but it turns out that that's the way they coded in HTML5. It has an end of the head. The one thing we don't have is a doctype. So we were expecting to get a doctype, and we didn't get one. So that's interesting, because when we did this last time, we got a doctype. Nope, it's not the one we were looking for. Everything wants to happen in its own way around here today. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Okay. So let's just take a look at what we have, and what we wanted to have up here was a thing that said doctype HTML. We're not getting it this very second, so we're going to have to get that fixed. But we will. Okay? And let's look at the XSL again. So we've got method equals HTML, version 5.0, UTF-8. What happens if we go to version 2? Perhaps we need to go to version 2 to get all of the output that we looked at. I could have lied about not needing version 2. So when we say we need version 2, then we have to go to the transformation scenario over here. We have to tell it to run a version 2 version of the, go to edit. We have to say, oh, instead of this transformer, which only supports 1.0, let's go to the granddaddy of all of them, 9.5.17 Professional Edition, and let's run that. Okay, and let's apply that. And we've got a proper HTML page, and then let's look at that here. So would we like to update it? Yes, we would like to update it. And look, when we chose the 2.0 version of the transformation engine, we got all the stuff that we wanted. So I'm going to back off. I had the doctype right, and then I backed it down to version 1.0, and I didn't realize that we lost this declaration up here. So for an HTML5 document, we need this doctype, and then HTML, And then typically the meta tag, which says how the content is encoded. In HTML5, for some reason, they just have a start tag. They don't have a start tag and an end tag. They don't code it as an empty element. Was that a bad idea for the committee to do? Yes, it was, but that's how they do it. Now, one of the interesting things is when we look at this in a typical XML editor, the problem is that it's not well formed. I wouldn't worry about that now because it is proper HTML5. Okay? Now, again, why did they choose something that was not well formed? Well, I think there is a faction on the HTML5 committee that are not XML fans. And so when we say, well, then that's not going to be well formed in an XML editor, they say tough. Now, are they nice guys? And when we get the final version of HTML5, will that change? Yeah, I think it probably will. I think the XML people will probably get their day in court. But for right now, what we're seeing here is a proper HTML5 page. And what content is in it? This is the content that we navigated through by starting up the default navigation again with the XSL apply templates. Well, we just visited each of the text nodes for each of the elements, and we put that output into the output, which is why, again, when we run this, we get a proper HTML page with just all that stuff in it. All right, let's do something a little more useful. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the XSLT, and I'm saying, do I really want this free for all navigation? Well, no, I don't, okay? Because what we learned in the lecture was this fill in the blanks and navigational model. And now what we're going to do is we're going to want to use those two approaches in which we don't turn the default navigation on again. We actually, under positive control, we navigate through the content that's in the document. So going to take out XSL apply templates. We're going to use that in the next unit, so don't despair, okay? And pull this baby in. And for some reason, this virtual machine just wants to act up on me today. And there's no explaining why that's true, but it is true. Okay. So let's start here by having some kind of title. So I like to do a title that is not an H1. I like to do a title that is an H2. Okay, so H2. All right. And I want to say the same thing that I set up here in the title. Assist partial list. So I'm just going to copy it and put the same thing down here. So not only is it going to become the title of the document that will appear in the tab when it's appropriate, but it's also going to appear in a heading. Okay, that's good. Now, how are we going to, well, why don't we save this and just show that we can get that much. Okay, so let's transform it. And we see we get out the title and nothing more. Why nothing more? Because we never restarted the default navigation behavior. We're going to have to go and actually navigate through the document with commands like XSL for each. Okay, so we have a lot of chapter elements. And how do I know that? Well, again, look at the XML document. We have a chapters root, and then we have chapter, chapter, chapters. What we want to do is we want to iterate over the chapter elements with an XSL for each. Okay, let's do that. So let's, within the body, let's go navigating. So we're going to say XSL for each. Okay. And we're going to say for each chapters, because our context is currently up at the root, because we matched on a slash. So for each chapters, chapter, okay, we're going to do something for each of the chapters. Okay, well, what are we going to do? Well, let's put out a paragraph. Okay? I like that. So we're going to put the information for each of the chapters in a paragraph. And the first thing we want to do is get out the chapter name. And I'd like it to be in bold. Okay? Let's put it into bold. So we put it inside of a B tag. We could have done that on our CSS style sheet, but we haven't gotten there yet. Okay, so we've got that B tag. And then how do we get values off of the input document? Well, with an XSL value of. And we are looking for select. Okay. And what is the, I'm sorry, can't do double clicking in this machine. We want within chapters slash chapter, within the chapter element, which is where we set the context every time we go around the for loop here, we want to pick the chapter name. Chapter name. Okay. And we don't need to enclose any text, so we can use an empty element. Okay. That looks good. Well, let's see if we run this, if we get a bunch of paragraphs, each having just the chapter name in bold. Let's hope we do. Yeah, we do. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters, because it's just a partial list, and we're getting those names in bold. Okay, that looks like a great start. All right, now let's do something else. Let's start getting some styling. I don't like the fact that we're getting that New Times Roman font, which I'm very, I have a real aversion to. So what do we need? Well, we need a style sheet. So how do we create a style sheet? Well, in the editor, we just go up and click on File, New. Okay, and then either under the recently used or under the new documents, we pick CSS and create, and we get a CSS style sheet. And what do we want to do? Well, here's my trick. I always want to show that I can style the body. So I put a rule in for the body. And what's the easiest rule for me to see? Well, what I do first is I turn the background color to a distinctive color like pink. Okay? Now, I'm not going to do that long term, but this is how I'm going to know if I succeed in connecting with my style sheet. And what do I want to call this? I want to call this chapter style, and that's going to give us a CSS extension on it. Okay? So chapter style.css. Now, how do we point to that? Well, we point to that from our HTML page. How do we do that? Well, if we think back and we remember, in the head, there is a link element in which we can link a style sheet. So we're just going to, right in the head, we're going to add a link element, L-I-N-K. We're going to space, and we're going to say href equal, and we're going to intend for this to be in the same directory. So this is going to be called chapter underscore style dot CSS. And then what other parameters do we need? What other attributes? Well, we need a rel for relation. It's rel equal style sheet. And we're also going to need a type. So we go down and we find type equals text, T-E-X-T, /CSS. All right, and this is an empty element. Okay, now, if I've really hooked this up, let's go back to the XML document and let's transform it, and we should see pink output. Pink output worked just fine. Okay, so that's what I typically do first, just to make sure I get what I call the plumbing working. Okay, plumbing's working just fine. All right, let's go to that style sheet, and let's, you can highlight that text and right-click and say you want to toggle a comment around it. Okay, and then we can say on the next line that we want to control the font. So let's just say font family equals, and I like this second one, Area Helvetical Sans Serif. That's going to get us sans serif fonts, okay? And I'm going to take the default size and all that kind of stuff. I just want this to have prettier typography than we currently have. Okay, so let's go back to the XML document, run the transformation again, and you can see that all the type in the document, because it's all inside the body, has all been styled in sans serif. And it looks like we're off to a good start. Okay, that's good. Now we need to get out some more information for each of our chapters. So we're going to do this as carefully as we can. Okay. So for right now, I am going to skip the next two elements because I want to come back to them when we have a little more experience under our belt. So the next two things that we could have are chapter name and school web URL. Now, if we just don't navigate to them and pull the information off of the input document, they'll just get ignored, so they won't come through. Right now, I want to do the advisor, and then we have alternate advisor. I want to do those two next because they're a little bit easier than these two URLs for websites. Okay, that those take a little bit of shady doing, and I don't want to get there quite yet. Okay, so we have the chapter name, and the next thing is for each advisor, we'd like to come up with a line that says advisor : space, the name of the advisor, and if we have an email address, because if we look at the DTD, we're going to see that the email address is optional. So we're going to have to check and see if we have an email address for the advisor. I'm sorry, that's the alternate one, but this is the advisor. They have the same structure. So the emails are optional. And we can also see here, if we go up into the content model for chapter, that we have at least one advisor, perhaps more than one. And we have an alternate advisor that is optional, so we can have either 0 or 1. Okay, so let's get the code to work for this. Sorry, let's go to the XSLT. So we're putting out the chapter name in bold. That looks good. So what's next? Well, what we want is we want to get a line break within the paragraph. How do we do that? Well, just up here, we just put a break tag, a BR/, for an empty tag. Okay, so that's going to get us a line break. So we can come down to the advisor line. Now, how many advisors have we got? Well, we've got at least one. We could have as many of them as somebody wanted to code. This looks like a great job for XSL for each. So let's use that. XSL for each. Okay, and select equal, well, for each advisor. So let's say advisor. All right, so what do we want to do? For each advisor, we want to, let's put this into italics. So let's start with an I, and then inside of there, let's say advisor, colon, space, and let's do the advisor name. So how do we pull something out of the input? Yep, XSL value of, XSL value of, and select equal its name. So the sub-elements of advisor are name, required, and email optional. So let's just do the name, okay? And let's just do that. Let's not worry about the email for now. Okay, now this idea where we do a little bit of coding and then we run a test, that's definitely the way that you want to do this. This is a language that doesn't give a lot of diagnostic errors. And so if you do just a little coding and then some testing, if you get a problem, you'll know that the problem is in the code that you just added. If you add too much, well then it makes it hard to find your errors. So we're going to transform this again. Oh, and this is great. So we've got advisors for each one, okay? And then we have 2 advisors for UCLA, but the problem is that we don't do a break in between the first and the second one. Well, let's get that fixed, okay? So let's go to the end of that line, okay? And after we put advisor, let's put a BR. Okay, let's transform with that and see if that solved our problem. It should. And it did. Now we have 2 advisor lines for UCLA. Well, that's terrific. Okay. Very good. Okay, so how are we going to deal with the fact that we may or may not have an email? Well, that's where we're going to use XSL if. So before we come to the end here, because we have this stuff, we would like everything in italics. Okay, so we're going to put out the advisor title and the name, and then let's just put in an XSL if, okay? And we're going to say, if we have an email, we're just going to type in the name of the element. If we have that, then we're going to do the work that's inside. Well, what's the work that we want? Well, let's put in some text. And the way to make sure you get the text, including spaces, or especially spaces reliably, is to put it inside an XSL text. Okay, so if we have an email address, we'd like a space and then a left paren, okay? And the next thing that we want is we want the value of the email address. So we can just do an XSL value of, and we can say select equals email. Now we know we're going to get it because we already tested to see if it's there. And we don't need to enclose anything by that value of, so we'll make that empty. And now we're not done because we haven't closed the parens. So let's XSL text and put a right paren. Now this is a matter of style, okay? You can often just type the space and the parenthesis, and it'll work just fine. It'll work more reliably for a parenthesis, well, almost always will work. But for spaces, they're problematic. So if I'm going to use an XSL text before because I have a space included, then I just like to use an XSL text after to make it kind of balanced. Could I just have put a right parenthesis there and had it work? Yeah, I probably would have. One of the nice things about XSL text is it calls the attention to it with your eyes. So I think that works really well. All right, so let's save this and go do the transformation again. And for the people who have an email address, we should see the email addresses. Okay, and that is going to be true of everyone except my old friend Stephen Downey, who, as a very busy man, has decided to not put his email address into the content that's on the web page. So if you're going to send him an email, then you probably have to know him already. Maybe you're already a member of the student chapter. Okay, so that's how we got that out optionally. And all this stuff is in italics still, so that's good. All right, now let's look back at our document and remember we have one instance of an alternate advisor. Okay, and how many of them can we have? Well, let's look at the DTD. We can have 0 or 1. Okay, now here's an interesting trick. Okay, now we could do an XSL if. Okay, but I want to show you that the trivial case of an XSL for each is that it works as an XSL if. Okay, how does that work? Well, let's just take the code that we have for advisor, okay, and let's copy it and make a couple of changes. Copy, paste it. Make a couple of changes for alternate advisor. So alternate, and then it's capital A advisor. Okay. So what do we have to change? Well, we're going to have to put alternate in front of the little text thing. Okay. And then we have the same thing for name and email. So what's going to happen is XSL for each works in the simplest case like an if. Okay, so if there isn't an alternate advisor, it's just going to drop through. and if there's 1, it's going to behave as it should. Now, if there were 2 or 3 or 4, which the DTD isn't going to allow to validate, then it would do all of them. But because of the DTD, and because we validate this before we do the transformation, here we're going to get, out of a for each, we're going to get either 0 or 1. Could we have done it with an XSL if? Yes, we could have. But this is kind of nice because we were able to copy the text that we had on top that for advisor. So let's give this a look-see. All right, go back to the XML document, transform it, and alternate advisor is working just fine. We only have one on Drexel, so Tony Corbo's here now, and that's very nice. Okay, that's good. Now, before we get into a couple of razzle-dazzle things that are a little bit harder, I just want to say, what would have happened at any point had we misspelled the name of the element in our XPath expression? So here, if we get an XPath expression wrong, here it's just the name of the element. Well, let's say we put an X in front of it. What happens? Well, it'd be really nice if it complained and said, oh, you don't have any elements of that name, so you must have made a typing mistake. But that's not what it does. It'll go, and let's do the transformation again. It will go and look for that element name that we asked for. And if it's not there, it's just not going to act on it. So what happens is that we get the program runs to completion, and we just don't see an alternate advisor for Drexel. This is one of the reasons why you want to add one part of the program at a time. Because when we added that, we knew that we were supposed to get an alternate advisor on Drexel. So let's go back and find out what went wrong. Oh, we had a typo in our XPath expression for what we were trying to select, and we fixed that. Go back to the XML and transform. So there are no error messages to say, oh, you didn't give me a proper name for this kind of document. You just won't get output. So this is why you want to build these up very incrementally like we're doing here. All right, let's close this and go back and look what's left to add. Well, not too many things. We have a school web URL, so we have a link to the school website. And we also, in the case of somebody, we have a chapter web URL. I think it's UCLA. Let's go look. Yeah, we have a chapter web URL for UCLA. So let's do the school web URL first. Okay. Now, I don't have to put these things in the same order in which they appear in the XML document. So let's put the URLs after the advisors. Okay? So here, we're just about at the bottom of the paragraph. Okay. So school web URL, how many of those do we have? Do we always have one? Well, let's look at our DTD. Do we always have one? School web URL? Yep, we always have it, and it's in this order. Chapter web URL, do we always have one? Nope, it's optional. You can have either 1 or 0. Okay, so let's make school web URL work first. All right. So let's So what we would like to do is we would like to put out a link, right? And the link is going to say something like this. Let's say it's going to be an A tag, right? And let's say href equals. And for right now, let's just say google.com. Okay? Which just point to a site that we know is absolutely there. Okay? And then we want to include some text. So let's say school web site. Okay? And let's say that we want to make sure that we have line fade at the end. So let's put a break at the end. Okay? So, sorry, put a question mark instead of a close tag. All right, that's good. Now, this isn't going to take the URL off of the input document, but we're kludging it just to see if we can get the right kind of output. All right, let's go back to the XML document. Let's transform it. And school website. Okay, so we got one for everyone. We were expecting to. And then let's click on it. And it doesn't seem to be able to come. Well, that's not doing what we want. So let's go back and look at what we did. I think we did the href wrong. So let's say it's, here's one I know will work. My little website, so let's say www.legend.net. Oh, I'm sorry, here's the problem. We don't have HTTP. http://www.legend.net. Okay. Oh, let's do a transformation with that. And the school website, let's click on it. And we go to the Legend homepage. Okay, that looks good. And we go down to UWM, it's the same thing. Well, this is nice. We've shown that we can put a link out, but we're not really populating this href attribute the right way. And I'm going to tell you ahead of time that we can't use the capability that we've used in the past. Everything that we pulled off of the input XML document so far, we have pulled off with XSL value of. Okay? And you would think that you should be able to put in here, in the parentheses for the attribute href, that you would be able to put a tag in for XSL value of, and it would do what we want. Well, let's try it. Let's get rid of the text we have. Let's say we want XSL value of, and when we say select equals, and what's the name of that element? I think it's called school web URL. If I remember that. And this is going to be an empty element. Oh, well, let's see, that's a syntax error. The value of the attribute href associated with element type A must not contain a less than character. So you can't put a normal XSLT expression inside of an attribute value. Then how do you do it? Well, it turns out there's a shorthand. Okay? We didn't do this in the lecture, so we're learning it here. We're going to use the name of the element. That's fine. Okay? And how do we say that we want to pull the text out of the element, we put it in curly braces. And this creates something called an attribute value template. Okay? Now, how do we know that? Well, we know that because we tried to do it the other way and it didn't work. Okay? And so we talked to Kevin, and Kevin goes, oh, forgot to tell you, you need to use this shorthand to pull the value off of the element when you're using when you're pulling the value off of the element, or you can do it with an attribute too. You just have to put an @ sign in front of the name. And you want to plonk it down inside of the quotes that contain an attribute value. Okay, so it's not complaining anymore. The moment we save and go back to the XML document, and let's transform. And let's see if we're going to the real school website now. Catholic University looks good. UWM. We're going to the SOAS site. Okay. And let's go down to my old friends at Illinois. We'll go to the GSLT site. Okay, good. So that's working. Okay, but we had to use an attribute value template. Now, could we do this for the next one, which is called chapter web URL? Yeah, we could. All right. Let me just run this transformation again because I may have an extra break. Let me go look. Do I have a break? No, I'm not getting an extra break, so that looks fine. I can do it like that. Okay, and then let's put the last thing in. Let's go over to the XSLT. Let's have it in XSL if, because we don't know if we're going to have a chapter web URL or not. So we're just going to say XSL if test equals chapter web URL. So first we have to look and see if we have one. If we do, then we're going to want to put out a line that looks very close to the link up here. So we're going to copy it and paste it down below, except instead of school web URL, we're going to say chapter web URL. Okay, so that's going to work just fine. And again, we have to use an attribute value template again. So let's back to the XML document, run the transformation, and there we are. So the only school in our list that has a school website, we said school website, did too much copying. So let's go back to the XSLT and can say, oh, we don't want the text to say school website again. We want it to say chapter website. So save that, go to the XML document, do the transformation, look at UCLA, they have a chapter website. We click on it, and we should go to the page, a WordPress page, for the UCLA Student Assist chapter, right there. Very nice. All right. So at this point, we have everything that we want except for, I think it would be nice for us to say when this was last updated. Remember that on our document, we have up at the top, we have this as of. Okay, so let's go and let's also show that we can get things out of order, because that's a very important thing to do. We don't want to be tied to the order of the elements in the document. But after we have put out the last of these chapters, let's put out a couple of breaks. Okay, so let's put out a blank line, and let's put out another blank line. And then let's put out a paragraph, because we want to put content into paragraphs in HTML pages. And why don't we say content current as of, and then let's put out the date. Well, are we plunking it into the value of an HTML attribute? No, we're not. That was a unique circumstances up there where we were doing the link tags. And typically that's the place where you have to do those attribute value templates. Well, so then we can just do a plain XSL value of. So let's do it. XSL value of select equals, and we want to start at the beginning of the document. We're going to do an absolute XPath expression. So start at the root, slash, and then go down to chapters. That's the root element name. And then within that, we want the attribute, @ called as capital OF. Okay? And that's what we're going to do. And then let's make that an empty element. Okay, so the content current as of, we're going to pull the as of date. And let's put a period after this. And this is going to show us that a lot of times with non-blanks, if we want to put one in the output, we can simply type it. Could we do XSL text? Yeah, we could do that too. In fact, we'll show that in a minute. So let's save this, go back to the XML document, run the transformation, content current as of, and we have the as of date. And you can see the period after the date. And could we also have decided that we wanted that period to be in an XSL text? Yeah, I think we could have. The thing I like about the XSL text, even though it's not a must-have, it's very good documentation. So whoever's reading your program can say, oh, after we put out the date, we're putting out some text. It's just a period. So let's look at this. We'll get the same effect from this, but it's maybe better documentation. You can maybe see it better. And you can see we still get the period here. So the things that we definitely need, or from time to time we need to force into the output with an XSL text, are spaces. They don't come out as reliably as we'd like them to. Non-spaces, pretty much you can type them where they would go in an HTML page and they will show up. But things like commas and periods and those things are kind of easy to miss when you're reading it. So putting them into XSL text is, I think, a nice style and one that I've adopted over the years. So here we have your whole demo. Okay, and could we have put more of the styling into the CSS style sheet than simply picking the font? Yeah, we could have, right? Could we have, for instance, got the bolding for the chapter name from a some kind of styling? Yeah, we could have done that from the style sheet. Could we have gotten the italics that we use for the advisors? Could we have used a style sheet to do that? Yeah, we could have. Could we have given the links, school website and chapter website, could we have given them a special style so they wouldn't look quite so ordinary and done that in the style sheet? Sure, we could do that. Okay, so all that's really doable, except this isn't a course in CSS. This is a course in XML and XSLT. Okay, so we didn't make it quite so fancy as it might be, or maybe quite so web standard friendly by doing everything in the CSS. But we definitely showed that we're able to link up a style sheet, and if we want to rely on that more heavily for the styling, well then it's just up to us to do the work. So I've gone on long enough here. I'd like to say thanks for listening, and I'm going to see you next time. Bye-bye.